Civilization VII had a rocky start in its first week. Released on February 10, it's still sitting on mixed reviews on Steam with more than 20,000 reviews, which is definitely not a great thing. A lot of the other channels are already covering those latest news and what Firaxis is trying to do with patches and updates, so I'm not trying to cover exactly that part. As a game developer, I have the opportunity to talk to you guys about the reality of game development, what studios face day by day, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and many things that you guys might not be aware of. And we will mention the current state of the situation here and there, but I'd like to focus more on the bigger picture, talking about the different kinds of decisions the developers have to make in those kind of situations. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff, like different leaders making conflicting decisions into the game, or stakeholders who don't understand the reality of game development, but they force decisions into the team. Or sometimes simply the trade-off of conscious decisions made by the team that they have to deal with. The first Civilization was released in 1991 by Microprose, the first company that Sid Meier created before Firaxis. And now we have Civilization VII, so that is 34 years of non-stop Civilization history, with a lot of updates and patches and new games, most of the time being very well received, but sometimes generating a little bit of controversy. So how do you maintain such a franchise? How do you deal with more than 30 years of innovation and continuation of the franchise and new stuff and captivating the same players over and over again, while also trying to attract new players, new audiences who have never played a Civilization game? Like, every time you have to consider that a lot of players might have never played any Civil game, and that is a big challenge. Like, how do you deal with that? And many times, and I'm sure you guys can agree with me on that, like many times if studios deliver something that is truly innovative and risky, because innovation is always risky, right? You don't know how people are gonna react to that. So when studios deliver something truly innovative, that might upset a lot of the established player base. But on the other hand, if they deliver exactly what is expected, that could be boring, uninspiring, it's not thinking ahead. And I think we can see that happening currently with Avowed. Avowed also released recently, and to many people, many reviewers and the player base, it's like an okay game. It's a decent game, but not bringing exactly anything fresh or anything outstanding. I saw a lot of people saying that if the game released in 2010, then it would be a revolutionary game, it would be outstanding. But in 2025, it's kind of okay-ish. And it's funny that Civilization VII and Avowed released like 1 week away from each other, because they are both being criticized for like the two sides of the same spectrum. Civilization's been criticized for trying to bring something new, some new elements to the already very established and successful Civilization formula, while Avowed is being criticized by not bringing anything new to the formula, right? It's just trying to replicate Skyrim-ish, with a little bit of narrative twists, but not really. So that is the criticism on both games. And it's really funny because they are the same, like different sides of the same spectrum. We're gonna have a separate conversation about Avowed, but I wanted to mention it here because it really feels like a good fit to the argument. If you follow the formula, and it's a well-established formula, but you don't bring anything new, you don't impress players, then it's probably not gonna stand out from the crowd, especially in today's market. Today's market's so saturated, right? Both from number of games and the quality of the games. Like, people have seen everything, right? Something that would stand out in 2015 doesn't do so today, because players have already played that a lot in several different games. So yeah, either back in the day or today, making games has never been easy. Hey guys, it's Harry. I've been a game designer and producer for the past 10 years, and in this video we're talking about Civilization VII, and I think that's a very good opportunity for us to reflect on the games industry and talk about various different things. And to me, that's really inspiring. That's one of the main reasons that I that I want to do these videos, right? I think I have very good opportunities to discuss those things with you guys. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel because that helps me a lot, and let's dive into it. So in game development, to stay relevant, you need to take risks. And we can kind of say that with any creative medium, right? Books, films, games, theater, like everything. If you want to be disruptive, if you want to bring something fresh and to impress people and to leave a mark on the market, you kind of need to take risks. But risks mean that not everything will resonate with people. Some people will enjoy, others won't. Sometimes it's going to be a hit and 95% of people will love it. But sometimes you really thought something would be breakthrough, but then people hate it or they are indifferent about it. That is the downside of taking risks, right? It's in the name. It's a risk. It's something that you cannot predict. Let's do a wild comparison with Joker the movie. Like, a lot of people at first didn't even want that movie to happen. People didn't want a movie about the Joker as protagonist, right? But once the movie was out there, people loved it. Like, it was intense, it was impactful, it was a very intense movie. And then people were like thrilled about it. And for a while, people talked about this movie so much. It got commercial and critical acclaim. It won an Oscar. But then the second movie was announced and we all saw what happened. Todd Phillips, the director of the film, got criticized for two very interesting things. He got criticized for not bringing anything new to the second movie because the plot was very similar to the first one. It was pretty much the same story, the same dilemma with the characters, the development was not so much there. But on the other hand, he got criticized for bringing something new, for making the film a musical, and already driving a lot of people off because of that. But if you think about it, in his mind, I'm sure that he was thinking that he was bringing something fresh and unexpected to the audience. And it's going to be impactful and it's going to be something very different and creative, right? So that's the fate of the innovators. Innovation is not always good, is not always well received. But if you want to continue being relevant over the years, you have to innovate. There's no two ways around that. You have to innovate, even if it's to test people's limits, to understand what the audiences want and what they accept, what they are willing to see, or in this case, to play. All right, back to the topic. I don't say that to excuse bad design, not at all. Like, a lot of the bad UI or the lackey UI that people were discussing for Civilization VII, I believe that could have been avoided. Given time and resources in playtest, I think those things could have been avoided. But I want us to be on the same page when understanding the hundreds and hundreds of different decisions that a studio has to make during the production of a game. And if that sounds straightforward enough, because they have done this before, right? Civilization VII came after Civilization VI, so it has to be easy. No, it's not easy at all. When you're creating a game inside a studio, there's this thing called the playtest. Playtest is extremely important for game development, and it simply means that people are playing your game early and often while being developed. In my team, we do playtests every week, even multiple times a week, because it's so important. But let me tell you this, no matter how good you are as a developer, as a studio, as an entire team, nothing substitutes a real player or hundreds of real players, right? You can think that you're creating something disruptive that people are gonna love. They're gonna be blown away by your creation, by your game. But when it reaches the market, then everybody hates it or they are indifferent to it. So you cannot predict. You can never predict how players or people in general are going to react to something that you're creating, to something that requires creativity. And that's just part of the game. Developers with decades of experience, veterans of their fields, still make the same mistakes time and time again. I mean, many times we cannot even call them mistakes because it's the simple fact that we cannot predict the market. We cannot predict how people evolve because The players of 2010 are very different from 2025. Even if you take yourself as a player, as a gamer, like the stuff that you used to enjoy in 2010 or that you thought was really cool, today doesn't resonate with you anymore. And yes, it's because you're older, but it's more than that. It's because the market and people are always evolving. The world is always changing. And a team doing a game today, they will stay making that game like for 2 years, for 5 years. And in 5 years time, the market's gonna be very different. Even if we picture a very renowned game studio and they're doing the same game twice, the exactly same game. They release the same game today and like 2 years from now. Today might be a hit, might be something that people love. And 2 years from now, the same game might not resonate at all with people, might be a great flop. I mean, that might be an extreme example, but it's really not that far from reality. It's a big and common challenge that Firaxis and many other studios have to face in dealing with bad reception to their games, trying to minimize the damage, navigating the market, and ultimately learning how to maintain and keep a franchise like that fresh for the players. And there's always this dilemma, right? The audience dilemma. You have to keep your loyal fan base, you have to keep them happy, especially in the case of a franchise like Civilization. Like, people have been playing Civilization, all of their games, for decades, for years and years, right? Since like a long time. So as a studio, you have to be faithful and loyal to those customers. But you also have to attract new people who never played Civilization, who don't even know what that's about. And those two audiences, they are very conflicting. Many times they're opposite. So how do you balance that out? That is a constant challenge that many successful developers will face. Sid Meier, the designer behind Civilization, he established a design philosophy for the Civ games that a third of the game was going to be something already established and already tested from previous iterations of Civilization games. Another third would be a small twist, right? It would take those elements that already worked, but they needed some polish, they needed some twist, and a third of the game would be about that, like polishing and tweaking those mechanics. And the final third would be entirely new mechanics, elements, stories, entirely new things. That was the formula to try and keep the essence of Civilization alive while still bringing something fresh at every iteration. And for most of Civ's history, that was very successful. Like Civ 5 was probably the most successful and iconic Civilization game, and one of the top entries to the entire strategy genre. And Civ 6 was equally well received, even if it required a little bit more patches and updates to really shine. And then we get to Civ 7 and the innovation third, right? The final third that added a lot of elements and got us to this controversial launch. So most notably, it's about the concept of evolving through the ages, so you don't follow one single civilization across the entire history. You now have the Antiquity Age, the Exploration Age, and the Modern Ages. So at each age, you follow a different civilization with the same leader. Like, you keep the same leader because the leader can evolve, can level up, can have different perks, but you evolve your civilization. So you don't follow the same one. And that was very disruptive, a very disruptive element to the design of 34 years of Civilization history. So the fact that you can combine different leaders with different civilizations and evolve with other civilizations across time, that was a paradigm shift to longtime Civ fans. And quite naturally, that wasn't very well received, right? And together with some UI issues, you could see how the reception is mixed, but I would say the UI issues are not the biggest problem. You even have very early mods already providing a much better version of the UI, and even Firaxis is already addressing the UI with new patches and new updates, so I don't think the problem relies on that. I think the key point is that following a design philosophy like that, like changing core elements of the game in some way, every iteration will sometimes bring something that is controversial, something that people will not accept or does not resonate with them. But that is the risk, in my opinion. That is the risk and the challenge of trying to bring something new. There's always this necessary risk if you want to stay relevant over time, because if you don't innovate, like if Civ 7 was simply Civ 6 a little bit more polished, people might not accept that as well. That's the key. In the games industry, not innovating is many times a prospect for long-term failure. And we all know those franchises that want to always play safe. They are too big, so they need to play safe, and they don't bring anything new, anything fresh. They don't impress players, and over time they lose relevance. They are not the same thing as before. We just remember the old past games where things were more impactful. But today, if you play too safe in the games industry or any creative medium, that will lose relevance over time. And as a player and as a game developer, I find it very inspiring that Sid Meier and Firaxis are still managing to keep Civilization relevant in those times, right? It's a 4X game. It's a 4X strategy game. It's not an easy game to get deep into. There's a lot of mechanics for you to understand. And so attracting new players to that is very challenging. And I applaud the effort that they're putting into this franchise, into the game, to try and keep it relevant for new generations. Since 1991, Civilization has left a mark on the lives of millions and millions of players. Not only people that could dedicate hours, like hundreds, thousands of hours playing the game and still having fun, but also making us reflect on the journey of mankind, the journey of civilization, like the real world. And that is amazing. That is one of the best things about games and game development. Games can do so much, and they have so much to say if they are good games, if they have good design, and we can explore different aspects of our own lives and of fantastical worlds and whatnot, like create our own stories inside those worlds, right? And that is something beautiful and powerful. And Sid Meier is a legend. He's an industry legend. He is one of the most iconic game designers of all time. And he carved a very interesting approach and definition for games themselves. Like he said in 1989 in the Game Developers Conference talk, he said that games are a series of interesting decisions. And that definition, while it's not perfect to analyze all kinds of games, I think it's perfect to analyze the Civilization games, right? Because each turn you have different decisions to make, and they need to be interesting. If the game's any good, those decisions need to be interesting and meaningful. And if they are, then you can create so many different paths with just the decisions that you take each turn. And they can lead you to entirely new game outcomes, like victory conditions or progression and a lot of other things. And that's awesome. The fact that Civilization, a deep strategy game that requires dozens of hours for you to start mastering, the fact that it's still relevant in 2025 is a remarkable achievement in an industry such as games, where the market and the player's expectation change so fast. Mobile games, microtransactions, battle pass, social media presence, making and maintaining games is as challenging today as ever before. To me particularly, what's important is that you have something to say as a game developer, that your game stands for something. It's not just trying to replicate something that's already done before, some supposedly easy formula. And yeah, I'm fully aware that everybody needs to pay the bills, and there are always stakeholders to please, including the players themselves. But the truth is that as a developer, you don't have control over how people will react to your game. They might hate it when you thought they were genuinely gonna love it. They might be impacted by some element of the game that you didn't even think about. You never thought that was gonna generate any hype or depth. So you have no control after a point. The least you can do is to create something that you believe in, something that you truly think will have a creative impact over people's lives. That's all we can do to create something meaningful. Sid Meier defined games as a series of interesting decisions, and I think as game developers we should honor that and create games that are meaningful to ourselves as much as the players. But it also surprises me a little bit that day one of a game's release still impacts people so much. Those times are pretty much over. Releasing and forgetting a game is not a thing anymore. Day one is just the beginning. You need to continue developing the game after its release, polishing it, adding more content, refining its features. That's how it works. You will not get it right the first time or the first day. I'm actually a big advocate to a more open development, where developers have more freedom to show players their project in the middle of production, creating something together with players. And that doesn't mean that every piece of feedback or opinion coming from the players in the community is that relevant and you need to follow it. No. That is a big no. That's absolutely the right way to fail. What I mean is failing fast. Instead of waiting 5 years to find out that your game has failed and that it doesn't resonate with people because you didn't test, you didn't show it to people, and they didn't give you feedback. And that's especially true for games like Civilization. That's not about a campaign. You don't finish the campaign and you're done with the game. No. It's more about the system that you can learn and explore and do better next time and do something different next time. It's about creating your own stories, your own path inside the game. You can try an approach in one playthrough and then try something radically different in the next. You can have different victory conditions, different personal objectives. It's an incredible tool to elicit your own creativity as a player. And then everything is defined on day one of release. If the game's good or not, if you enjoy it or not, that doesn't make any sense. Games are living things. It doesn't have to be a live ops game. It doesn't have to be a free-to-play mobile game. But games today are living entities, and it's important that developers have that in mind during the production of their games, but also that players have that in mind when experiencing games, when judging them. More than ever, players have a fundamental role in helping developers create better games and refine them. But what do you think? Leave in the comments below and I'll make sure to reply to that. That's it guys, thank you so much for watching the video and I'll catch you guys next time.